Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing here. So right now in Path of Exile, I'm about to do maps, and getting into maps, I was kind of saving some gear and putting it all on my character at the same time. And this kind of idea is one that I've adapted and used many times now in Path of Exile. I think it's probably the most effective way to gear out a character, but in case it isn't, this will be the guide of where I show you guys how I tend to gear up my character. Now I know I have a lot of stream advantages and all that to get currency, to get gear, availability, all that shit. I get it. But that's not really what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is the concept of where you want to be throughout the lifespan of your character in Path of Exile in terms of gear. So, you make a new character, hopefully you have some leveling gear. If not, no big deal. You just use whatever. You can pretty much get to middle of Cruel with just absolute trash. But when you start, facing even possibly as early as like Cruel Brutus, if you're a melee character, having really shitty gear is going to be very painful. And the idea is, this is when you're gonna want to start to get some gear. You can get gear through the forums. You can get gear through the trade channels and PoE. Overall, I've found the experience to be quite painful, so be aware that's probably going to be the case. But, you can do it self-found. A lot of what people don't really understand is which gear to upgrade first if you're playing melee or semi-melee with Spectral Throw or shit like that, which everyone else is playing these days. You want to focus on your weapon, and you want to focus on getting either gear that has a lot of HP or a lot of resists, and preferably a combination of both, but that's often not a reality. So you want to try to get your resist as high as possible. There are two different strategies to gearing up with resist. There's one where you try to get just as much as you can, and there's the other where you try to stack one or two and be weak to another one or two. Stacking resists is a good idea if you're not on Nemesis, but because on Nemesis the monsters have the volatile affix where they blow up for an element based on their main hand damage, I've been told, not having a particular resist can lead to a death if you make a small mistake even. So in Nemesis, I think it may be the best decision to just try to keep up with your resist as much as you can to an acceptable level. When it comes to keeping up resists, buying a cheap gold rim helmet or something like that, 1 or 2 chaos, is probably better than investing 1 or 2 chaos in your own gear. So you kind of need to be aware of that. While you do have alpha, while you do have chaos, it may be a good idea to trade for items that you need rather than rolling your own, at least when you're leveling up. So as you're doing this, you just keep up as best you can with the resists. If you're having problems staying alive, just get more HP in the passive tree. Just kind of like wing it, basically. And then when you get the Merciless, winging it is not really going to fly anymore because, the content that you're going to do is going to require that you have a pretty solid character. So as a result, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to assemble a set of gear that is pretty good. And this may take some time. This may, have you talk to your friends, check out the forums, all the shit that you typically do to find items in Path of Exile through the means of other people. Do all that. Try to put together just some gear set that works. So you don't really need to cap all resists, but I'd probably try to have cold above 65. I'd probably want fire above 70, and I don't think I'd mess with lightning. I think I'd just keep lightning at 75, or maybe like 73 or so. But basically, you want really high resists. You want as much survivability as you can. Armor is really not that important this early on. It's just too expensive of a commodity. Like, you're not going to find a gear piece that has good armor, good life, and resists for cheaps. Not happening. So if you give up the armor, often it's going to be somewhat affordable. If you give up a resist, it's going to be really cheap. So that's the kind of thing you're going to look around. Like a piece of gear that has very high life and at least 1 solid resist. People, when they look at an item, they disregard the item if it has only 1 resist. But, sometimes that 1 resist is like 43 cold or some shit. So, that is a lot better than an item that has 2 resists in the 20s, if your gear set allows for it. But some people don't really take account for this, so they sell it for much less than it's worth. And, it's very important to realize this fact, to try to get as much as you can out of the currency that you have available. And the idea is this like mismatched whatever kind of gear set that you put together to cap out your Resistant Merciless. Typically you put together this gear set around Act 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 if you're struggling on currency. But this gear set is what I always use until my character is like done. So, you know, one example is the Discharger. The Discharger in Onslaught, I used the shittiest fucking gear ever until I was like 87 or something crazy. You know, I was using trash gear. Just gear that was absolutely worthless, just like 4 links, you know, that kind of shit. And, you know, I got through it. And while I was, you know, setting up this character, I was accumulating a lot of really powerful gear. The problem in this game is, if you get one really powerful piece of gear, it doesn't necessarily work with the other existing gear. So you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to find pieces that are really good to improve your gear. But if you do it one at a time, it can be problematic, take more time, and cost more currency. So the idea is, you know, you assemble these items, and as you're nearing the end of your assembly of crazy items, you get 1 or 2 mediocre items to fill in the gaps. So for instance, you know, as I adapted this strategy again on my Ranger, and now I'm using my pretty good gear, you know, I had a really good chest, I had really good rings, I just bought some pretty good gloves the night before, and the last piece that I was really missing were the boots. And the boots, I needed something like 30 lightning resist and 10 fire resist, or something like that. So this is a pretty flexible piece of gear because, you know, boots with 30 lightning, 10 fire, some life, and move speed are not really that expensive. So that's the idea. You want to try to get as good gear pieces as possible in the individual sense, accumulate them, and then find, you know, the last few and get it all going all at once. Yes, you may have the unfortunate untimely death of your character because your gear isn't quite good enough, but you should be aware of this fact. Often when you are setting up to a huge, you know, complete gear overhaul, that's when you're going to do the difficulty jump. So that's when I'm, for instance, this time around, this is when I'm starting maps. And in the prior sense, that's when I started soloing with the Discharger. You know, before I had the really good gear, I just played with other people. Yes, it was slower, but, you know, I made it through. And that's really what counted. So overall, you want to keep that in mind. You want to have a strategy. If you go one piece of gear at a time, you're going to find yourself paying a lot more for each individual piece. And, you know, you may find an upgrade while you're doing it. So it's very important to be smart about it. It's very important to understand the fact that, you know, as good as one piece of gear is, it still has to work with the rest of your gear. And you are paying for that difference unless you have some kind of strategy to compensate for it. So, hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.